So I'm going to turn this over. Dr. Munson is our assistant superintendent at OSPI, and she is particularly in charge of assessment and student information. And she has been also, she is the lead Smarter Balanced person in our state as well. But also, I'm guessing she probably plays a pretty significant lead role nationally with her connection to the former executive director, being that they came from the same department, worked very closely together. So we're just very honored that she chose to be with us today. And I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Munson.
Great. Thank you, Glenn. All right. Good morning, everybody. Thanks for coming, and thank you to Glenn and Nancy, the WERA board, everybody for sponsoring today's activities and inviting me to be part of it, although I did get the message from Glenn that this is to be a peer-to-peer exchange of ideas, and so I'm not here with new information, and we're going to try to stay away from the weeds of Smarter Balance. I will be here all day and am happy to take questions from you, but although Glenn says I'm the expert, I actually have a team of experts that work with me, and I am constantly asking them for the specifics of how this is going to work. So I wanted to call your attention to a handout that's in your packet on the left side. It looks like this. And this is something that I found. I was working on my presentation, which, as you see, has a Seattle Seahawks theme to it. I was thinking we kind of need to take a 12th man attitude about Smarter Balance. And I went to the Ready Washington website, which is a coalition of agencies and groups who are providing communication support around our new state learning standards and our new assessments. And on that website there is a section called Teacher Voices, and I found this wonderful piece by a former teacher in Kent. Rozak says that Amy Abrams has now been moved to the central office to help with the implementation of Common Core and our other new state learning standards. But I think Amy's piece on why not us helps frame the conversation that I want us to have this morning. So think about how prepared you and your school or your district is for the first operational year. Are you good to go? Everybody thumbs up, ready, set, just bring it on. Are you ready but a little nervous? You think you're ready but you're still a little nervous. It will be the first time after all, and it is a really big thing. Are you just totally confused? There's TIDE, there's ART, there's ORS, there's TDS, there's more and more and more of what I refer to as the alphabet soup. Are you just now realizing that this thing didn't go away that you've been hearing about for years, and you were hoping that maybe a groundswell in some of those really red states was going to swing through Washington and the whole thing would be abandoned? Or are you really at a state of just, oh, okay? So I want to ask that today we take a step back from any of those feelings and reflect on why this is so important to us. So while we're talking about usernames, training modules, designated supports, and scoring rubrics, and all the alphabet soup that I mentioned before, let's just keep our eyes for, at least for a little bit this morning, to get ourselves motivated for the rest of the day, talking about the significant accomplishment that we're pursuing. So I want to highlight the 12 reasons that I think this is really big, Smarter Balance, and can't talk about Smarter Balance without also talking about our new state learning standards. So I want to share the reasons that I think it's really big, and then I'm going to highlight 12 keys to a successful testing season. But first, I want you to just take a moment. You don't need to talk with friends. You're welcome to talk with friends, but just take a moment and list as many reasons as you can think of in a minute or two. Notice 1 to 2, that makes 12. In 1 to 2 minutes, you'll notice all these little tricks all the way through here. Think about why Smarter Balance is really big. let's have you reflect as I go through my list and see how many we have in common, and perhaps there are others that you're thinking that I didn't think about as I was putting this together. So my first reason is that we are talking about the right learning standards. We have a major shift in our state learning standards in English language arts and math. And our students deserve these learning standards. We know that these learning standards are going deeper on fewer topics and will help students have a deeper understanding of the key concepts that they need to be successful when they graduate from our schools. And having those be adopted in so many states help that consistent learning expectation of all students across the states that have adopted Common Core. We know that we are expecting students to be college and career ready, and we have not been successful having students college and career ready. Our remediation rates in our CTCs and colleges are pretty atrocious, and year after year after year. So as a system, not just in Washington, but across the nation, we need to step our game up. We have a global competitiveness that we need to rise to. And these new standards will help us get there. Right now, we have about 25,000 unfilled jobs for highly skilled workers. That's in 2014, I think. By 2017, that's going to double. So the level of skill and knowledge that we need from our high school graduates is always increasing, and we need to, in K-12 education, step our game up. And we think that these learning standards are the path to that. And we can solve the challenge. We have the appropriate learning standards, we use effective instruction, and we have the proper measurements to know that we're hitting those targets. We can produce highly skilled workers and solve and become more globally competitive. The second reason that I think this changed our standards and particularly the adoption of the assessment now is that we have had significant Washington teacher involvement in the development of the Smarter Balanced Assessment System. I'm not going to use the triangle for Smarter Balance. I didn't bring the pyramid today. I think you've all seen that. You know, you've seen it 400 times, some of you. If not, go to our portal, our OSPI webpage, the Smarter Balance webpage, and you'll know we're talking about a balanced system. A system that has the digital library, has the interim assessments, and the summative assessments. Well, all of that took development work, and that development work happened over the last 4 years that the Smarter Balance Consortium has been in existence, funded by the Department of Education, to help states come together and develop an appropriate assessment, an assessment system. So we've had teachers develop the item specifications and review those. We've had many teachers develop individual items. So the items that your students are going to be seeing may have very easily been developed by someone in your building or someone in the building next door. We had a state network of educators who developed and or vetted materials that are in the digital library. So all of those useful resources may have been developed by your peers. We had significant involvement in identifying what the achievement level descriptors should be. What does it mean to be college and career ready at each grade level? What will those score levels mean? And then we had even public involvement as well as teacher, higher ed, business community involvement in setting the achievement level cut scores. How many of you took part in the online achievement level setting activity that was open to anybody and everybody who wanted to help set the cut scores? Okay, so maybe 5% of the people in the room. But that was an opportunity that was available to everybody. It turns out that about 65% of the people who participated in that and the other achievement level setting activities were teachers. Washington had more teachers involved in that than any other state. So when we look at our results at the end of spring and say, ooh, or yay, we need to look among ourselves and say, yeah, we're not terribly surprised. We knew these were going to be rigorous. We defined what college and career ready is. And this is where we are right now, because we're only at the beginning of implementing our new standards, and things will only get better from here. And then we've had teachers help communicate about our new standards and about our assessments by sharing their voices with many. There are several different grant opportunities that teachers have been involved with to become expert communicators about this. There are the teacher voices that are highlighted on the readywashington.org webpage, which is that communications campaign I referred to earlier. The third reason I think this is really big is that it has been a multi-state collaboration. Notice I didn't say federal. It's not a federal test. It wasn't mandated by the U.S. Department of Education. It was supported with money to bring all of the states together, but it wasn't mandated by that. So we have the Seahawks in a huddle. We had various states in a huddle over the 4 years, contributing their technical, technological, practical, and political expertise to come up with the best possible assessment system that we can. Some states, like Oregon, have had experience with computer adaptive testing. They brought that expertise. Some states, like Washington, have had a lot of teacher involvement in writing items and reviewing items and range finding and scoring, and we contributed that expertise. So states from all across the country who participated in Smarter Balance have collaborated and continue to collaborate. As the grant has been coming to an end, the tests are now handed over. There still is a consortium, but we are taking more ownership as individual states. So just yesterday on the K-12 state leads call, and as Glenn indicated, I am your K-12 state lead, we were talking about some of the needs that we're finding with interim assessments. Gee, it would be nice if we had a test administration manual for the interim assessments as well as for the summative assessment, instead of that all being bundled into one. Delaware said, yeah, we parsed it apart and we have one for the interims. And all of us said, we need a copy. We please share with us as soon as possible. So similarly, with the hand scoring tool, the teacher hand scoring tool, the materials that we were provided by the consortium and through our vendor AIR were pretty, lacked a user-friendly feel. And we thought, well, this might be fine for folks who are used to scoring tests, but it's not going to work for a classroom teacher who is first looking at this tool. So our staff in Washington consolidated all of that into common frameworks and have incorporated that. We did a webinar for other states late last week, and everyone is drooling over the materials that are now posted in Washington's teacher hand scoring system to guide teachers with knowing how to score the hand-scored items on the interim assessments. So we are sharing that with any and everybody who wants to have those materials. So the multi-state collaboration has been extensive for the last 4 years, and it continues. My fourth reason is that the Smarter Balance test, as you know, one of the big changes for us is that the test will be computer adaptive, meaning that as students answer questions, the next questions will either become harder if they answered correctly, the same or harder, or they will become easier. And this approach represents a significant improvement over our previous tests. All of our previous tests had to zero in with most of the questions being right around that level of difficulty that would tell us whether the student met standard or didn't meet standard. Now with a computer adaptive test, we have a test that will measure more skill across the full continuum of students' abilities. Our fifth reason is that we have aligned interim assessments. I know if you let yourself get deep in the weeds, you're going to say, yeah, but I can't get the scores out at the moment, or I can't get teachers into them at the moment, or the score reports don't go very deep at the moment. But I ask you to step back and think about the fact that the state has never provided interim assessments that are fully aligned with the summative assessment, that are fully aligned with our learning standards, and that will provide those kind of benchmark knowledge for teachers to be able to shape their instruction. The interims should be fully accessible, just like including all of the accessibility designated supports and accommodations, so that you have a chance to have students become familiar with the test engine and the accommodations that they are familiar with using in their classroom instruction. I understand that getting some of those accommodations to work right now in the interims may be a problem, and believe me that every problem that you are reporting to us now is a high priority for OSPI and AIR, and AIR has been extremely responsive in trying to address the hiccups or the challenges that we have now. The interim assessments, unfortunately, this is again one of these disappointments, are not computer adaptive this year, and that just has to do with the size of the item bank. The item bank that populated the interim assessments came from the same item bank that was field tested last spring. So Smarter Balance developed a whole big pool of items. They field tested those. The ones that survived, which was the vast majority, were divided in half, and half went to the summative test and half went to the interim test. Smarter Balance will continue to pilot items and grow that item bank, but until they get more items piloted or field tested, they won't be able to have them be computer adaptive. We are expecting that at least with most of the blocks that they will be computer adaptive by next year. Schools have the flexibility to either use a comprehensive or a clone of the summative test, the interim comprehensive assessment, which does take a lot of time because it is a clone of the summative. But I've talked with several of you in the audience this morning and have heard that some of you have been using that with your schools. Also, there are the shorter interim blocks which focus on a subset of standards and skills. They should provide a more detailed picture of where students are in relationship to the summative test than we've ever had before, particularly from the tests that were provided. And eventually the comprehensive tests at least will be reported on the same scale. So you should have a pretty good picture after students take the comprehensive test of how students will do on the summative test. We also then, number 6, and I could have made this number 1, we have instructional resources that are related to the state standards and then to the fully aligned interim and summative tests. So these are in the digital library, and that digital library contains a variety of supports for kindergarten through 12th grade teachers, so these aren't limited just to the grades that are tested. And there are modules about assessment literacy, there are instructional modules, there are education resources. We were at a meeting the other day and someone said, I just need a video of a teacher teaching to the Common Core standards, and we can't find that. It's like, oh my gosh, there are like 35 of them in the digital library. Just make sure that your teachers have access to that. And then teachers can rate those materials, sort of like on Amazon, did you really like this book or not like this book, and why did you like this book? And there also is that social media component to the digital library where teachers can collaborate with other teachers in Washington on a particular topic, or other teachers from around the other member states of Smarter Balance, of which there are now about 20. Pete Carroll is pretty excited about this part. Smarter Balance is going to have a faster return on scores. So this is because the items are mostly machine scored, and the delivery system is online. So, that will yield a 3-week turnaround on scores. So individual scores will show up for students kind of on a student-by-student basis within 3 weeks after the student completes the test in the online reporting system for the summative assessment. I hesitate to take a question, but I'm gonna just
Sorry.
go ahead.
At the risk of sounding like a dinosaur, we're taking paper pencil, so do you have an update?
Shame on
that
you.
timeline?
Shame on you. Yes, so the online reporting system will house the paper pencil test results as well. So what will happen with paper pencil tests, when your school finishes their testing, you'll ship those paper pencil booklets to the vendor. They will score them. They will enter those scores in the online reporting system. You will have your results for paper pencil tests 3 weeks after the vendor receives the test. So they essentially, once the vendor receives the test, will become as if they were online. It's be a little protracted, but the vendor is telling us that they ought to be able to have those results within 3 weeks. So when we talk about return of scores, the 3rd grade ELA test is always on the top of everyone's mind. For those of you who aren't in an elementary school, we have a law that says that for students who score a level 1 or below basic on the Smarter Balanced English Language Arts test, teacher, principal need to meet with the student's parent before the end of the school year. Well, because of that, and during that conversation, talk about the student's lack of skills in reading and what can be done between now and 4th grade in order to bring that student's reading skills up so that the student can go ahead and progress to 4th grade and carry on with their progression through K-12. Or talk about the necessity, or if there would be any advantage to keeping the student in 3rd grade. OSPI is not recommending retention. The law just leaves retention as one of the possibilities for that parent conversation. Okay, if you think about, you need to meet with every parent for a student who might score at a level 1. We needed to leave about 3 weeks for those meetings to take place at the end of the school year. You add 3 weeks for the scores to be turned around, now we're talking 6 weeks from the end of the school year. Then you need to have a window in which to administer the test, so that window got set ridiculously early, mid-March to the end of April, to accommodate the various ends of schools around the state. I'm going to just keep going, but I'm happy to come back to questions at the end. But we'll never get out of here at 10. But I think I will finish early, and then I'll take some questions. So the turnaround, the fact that these scores will come back student by student should really facilitate these end-of-year meetings. You as the district assessment coordinator or the principal, the teacher can watch for those scores and schedule the meetings as necessary. Okay. Reason number 8, we're almost there. We're going to 12. Reason number 8, more accessible to more students. The Smarter Balance system, including the interim assessments, are designed to be able to accommodate students with who are learning the English language more so than ever before, not fully, but more so than ever before, and students with disabilities or students in special education. And there are 3 kinds of supports. There are those things that are just provided in the online test engine and are available to everyone, and students sort of choose whether they want to enlarge the font or highlight, use the highlighter or things like that. Then there are designated supports, such as a translation or a glossary, and some adult needs to decide that that is an appropriate support for the student, but it doesn't require an IEP or 504 plan. Those are just things that from your familiarity with the student in the classroom, you can say, yep, this is something that won't distract the student and actually will help the student do well on the test. So we'll turn this feature on. And then there are those accommodations, what we typically have referred to as accommodations for students with IEP or 504 plan, such as a Braille test. The ninth reason is that these tests and our learning standards are connected to higher education. A unique feature of the Smarter Balance Consortium was not only was there a K-12 lead, there also was a higher ed lead who had equal importance to the process. Our higher ed lead was Randy Spalding from the Student Achievement Council. There was higher ed representation at every teacher event, so university professors who were used to receiving students who had earned a Washington State diploma or a diploma from a Washington school participated and talked about that college readiness and the remediation and how do we know where students should start their education. In Washington, we've had particular involvement of higher ed in that our schools have established a memorandum of understanding to use scores for placement and remediation activities in higher ed. So our community technical colleges and our four-year institutions have agreed that students who score at a level 3 or 4 will be able to skip the placement test in English, language, arts, and math and move right into credit-bearing courses. Which is a huge cost savings for individual students and their families and for the state as a whole. In addition, our community technical colleges have partnered with OSPI to develop transition courses. Those transition courses are designed for students who don't meet level 3 or 4 when they take the 11th grade assessments, but score at a level 2. Then they will take this transition course in their senior year, and if they get a B or better in that course, they also rise to that same agreement with the community technical colleges in that they don't have to do the placement test and can go into non-remedial, full credit-bearing coursework. So we really are one of the first states to have established this MOU with higher education, and that is a really big deal. And we should celebrate the fact that that has happened in our state. This graph down at the bottom is a section, is just a snagget from the Ready Washington webpage. You can find this infographic on the Ready Washington page, and it is kind of designed to help parents and counselors think about what happens really beginning with scores on the Smarter Balance tests in 8th grade. And what does that mean? And what do students need to do in order to become college and career ready? It doesn't speak so much about our high school graduation requirements, which, as you know, change from year to year, but really talks at a higher level about college and career readiness and refers to the transition courses. So if you haven't seen this infographic, you might want to check that out. My 10th reason is that there has been an unprecedented transparency of the development of this assessment. There have been no secrets. Washington was the fiscal agent, but even if we weren't, we would have had visibility of what the test costs, how the tests are governed, how states are participating. The digital library resources were vetted and developed by members from each of the states. The practice tests have been available for your Aunt Martha and Uncle Tom for over a year and a half, as well as kids in your classrooms and schools. So everybody can have a feel for what these new tests are going to be. And then, as we already talked about, the achievement level setting was certainly an open process, and everybody was welcome to put their vote in for where the cut scores should be set. Smarter Balance costs less. This is a huge savings for Washington. Some states, this isn't the case. states who had only multiple choice online tests in the past are seeing an increase in the cost of implementing Smarter Balance, because when you have tests that have performance tasks or open-ended questions that require human scores, the cost of those tests go way up. In Washington, we've always tried to assess that deeper knowledge with performance tests in our tests back since 1997. And so we've had one of the more expensive assessment programs in the country. But so for us, moving to this consortium-built test is saving us quite a bit of money. Instead of $30 per test per student, so $30 for reading, $30 for writing, $30 for math, and for science per student, we now will have $30 for the English language arts, so that covers reading, writing, and the math test. And along with that, so we're already cut the cost about in half. With that, we get access to the digital library and access to the interim assessments. So the cost is a really big deal. And finally, both the standards and the scores will be comparable to other states. And this was the initial impetus of governors who got together about 5 years ago, 6 years ago, and said, you know, we are so tired of being compared to each other when we have totally different standards. And our proficiency rates can't be compared. You know, Texas was always the state with the best education because they had more students meeting standard on their test. Well, take a look at their standards and the cut scores were not really comparable to the high standards that Washington had set just prior to No Child Left Behind coming into play, where all the states started comparing results. This will provide more continuity to students as they move across the country, particularly important for families in the military, and we'll have proficiency rates that are comparable. Perhaps we'll be the smarter NFC champs. So just in summary, we have the right learning standards, we've had Washington teacher involvement, multi-state expertise and collaboration. The tests are computer adaptive. We have aligned interims. We have instructional resources that are aligned to our standards and the assessments. We'll have quicker results. The tests are more accessible. We have connection to higher ed. We have unprecedented transparency. The tests are less expensive and they are comparable to other states. I think those are really big deals. So how are we going to get there? This isn't going to go deep in the weeds, but just keep in mind this notion of Russell Wilson, number 3, saying separation is in the preparation. So if we want to separate ourselves from everyone else and from our past, we need to be prepared. So first and foremost, I want you to keep in mind, as Glenn indicated, ground all of your work in the learning standards. Don't be focused on what we need to do to pass the test. What do we need to do to get children college and career ready? What do we need to be teaching? Not what do we need to do to be testing. Now, with a bit more respect to the Smarter Balance test, know the rules. We have the Washington Comprehensive Assessment Program portal, and everything you need to know as a district assessment coordinator, many things you need to know as a test administrator or a building test coordinator are in the portal. Everything, and I think Glenn indicated, just about everything we think we're going to have is posted. As more things are developed, or as we can streamline some of those and provide checklists, do this, this, and this, we will continue to try to provide that support to districts. Check your equipment. It's really, really critical that we have the proper equipment with respect to the test. This, of course, means the technology. One of the best ways to do that is to try the interim assessments. Make sure that the test engine and everything related to that is working. If it's working for the interim assessments, you should have no problem when it comes to the summative assessment. Rely on coaches. So utilize your district leaders, both in curriculum instruction, your district assessment coordinators, your principals, your building test coordinators, make sure they are all functioning as a team and are moving forward and helping the folks in the classroom. Develop your bench of test coordinators, so at the building level, and I should have said, and test administrators in the classroom teacher level. Use the training films. So the WCAP portal has a variety of topic-specific training modules for each person who has a separate role, and those training films explain what they're going to see and what they need to be able to do on the assessment system. Practice, practice, and practice more. And remember that you're keeping all of your work grounded in the learning standards. So the practice tests are available and should be used freely. The interim assessments are another way of providing practice, and Brian is going to be talking about that a bit later. When you practice, or when you get information from the interims, adjust the playbook, meaning instruction, to address any needs that are highlighted there. Don't foul. In the testing world, this means try to keep irregularities to a minimum and report them to us. Understand the score. So what will these scores mean? I know you haven't seen detailed examples of what the score reports will look like because they haven't yet been developed. But as soon as they are developed, we will provide them to you and explain all the portions, the parts of the score. You should understand what a claim score is, what the overall composite score is, and what that means to help parents with that understanding as well. Talk to the media. It is so critical that, and you probably have rules in your district about who's allowed to talk to the media, but I say this fairly globally. Make sure your community understands about the new standards first and foremost, about the new assessments that come along with the new standards, and about the new proficiency rates that we are likely to see. So the fact that we have changed standards and have new assessments, we're going to have a new baseline, and everybody needs to be thinking, we're going to have a new baseline. I wonder what that baseline is going to be. Not, oh gosh, our scores are going to drop from last year. They're not going to drop from last year. We're starting over. The scores are going to be something. Those will be our new baseline. And finally, celebrate your accomplishments. So you all are working very hard. If you can celebrate that each of your building has a test coordinator and that test coordinator has gone through 2 training modules, celebrate that. All the way along the way, however small, however big it is, celebrate your accomplishments. And then at the end, hopefully we'll be able to celebrate everything. So why not us? You refer back to Amy Abrams' blog this morning, or her letter. I think we each do need to ask us, so why not us? So I hope you guys have a great exchange of ideas today, and thank you for your patience with OSPI. We really are scrambling as fast as we can, working on something that isn't quite finished and is happening. We're not the only state. We are among 20 that are scrambling to implement Smarter Balance, but if we keep the big picture in mind, I think we do have a lot to celebrate and be proud of. Know that we have a new baseline, and next year is going to be easier than this year. So with that, thank you.